I remember that chilling morning in the Adirondacks like it was yesterday, the frigid wind cutting through my jacket as I stood alone, shivering, while my daughter's footsteps faded behind me. She left me there, abandoned, as if I were invisible. That moment crushed something inside me I never thought could break. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if for even a second this feels familiar, I only ask that you like this video and subscribe. It will help me keep opening my heart. My name is Eleanor, and at 72 years old, I thought I knew what loneliness felt like. I was wrong. Real loneliness isn't being alone in a room, it's being surrounded by family who treat you like a burden they're stuck with. It's watching your own daughter's eyes glaze over when you speak, like your words don't matter anymore. My days had become a blur of early sunrises in our cramped Brooklyn apartment on Flatbush Avenue. The radiator clanked through the night, and the hum of city traffic never quite settled into silence. My hands were stained with calluses from decades of caregiving, cleaning, and working whatever odd jobs I could find to make ends meet. At my age, I was still on my feet 12 hours a day, carrying grocery bags that felt heavier each week, managing the 70-year-old creaks in my bones that reminded me daily that time was running out. The smell of cinnamon coffee and old books from the library downstairs was my only comfort in the mornings, before the phone would ring with another cancelled weekend visit. Or worse, a dismissive text from Rebecca, my only daughter, who thought I was just too old-fashioned, too stuck in the past to understand her modern life. "Mom, you're embarrassing," she'd say when I'd mention wanting to spend time together. "I have a career now. I can't just drop everything to babysit you. Babysit me." As if I were a child instead of the woman who had raised her single-handedly after her father walked out when she was 12. I used to dream of weekend trips together, adventures across the Adirondack Mountains where we could talk like we did when she was a girl. Back then, she'd sit on my lap while I told her stories about the old treasure chest rumored to be buried somewhere in those ancient hills. Her eyes would light up with wonder as I described the $6 million fortune that some old-timers swore was real, left behind by a wealthy family during the Great Depression. But those dreams felt foolish now. Rebecca ridiculed them every chance she got. "Mom, you're living in the past, you and your ridiculous treasure stories," she'd laugh, but not the warm laugh I remembered from her childhood. This was cold, mocking. "You're chasing ghosts. It's pathetic." She always said I was delusional, living in fairy tales while she dealt with the real world. And yet, here I was that morning, abandoned in those very mountains she claimed didn't hold any magic. The cold was seeping into my bones as I clutched the last faded photo of our family, taken before everything fell apart, before her father left, before she decided I wasn't worth her time anymore. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had brought me here, to these mountains, supposedly for a mother-daughter bonding trip. "Let's do this for old time's sake, Mom," she had said with what I thought was genuine warmth. I had been so excited, so hopeful that maybe we could rebuild what we'd lost. Instead, she had walked away. Simply walked away. Leaving me standing by an old oak tree with nothing but my purse and a thermos of coffee that was already growing cold. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the years that led to that moment, the slow erosion of love that happens so gradually you don't notice it until you're drowning. My daughter never saw the sacrifices I made. How could she? When you're busy building your own life, you don't have time to look back and see the foundation someone else laid for you. Flashbacks flood my mind even now, memories so vivid they make my chest ache. I remember signing those papers at Chase Bank on Atlantic Avenue, deferring my retirement savings to cover her tuition at NYU. $28,000 I had saved, penny by penny, working double shifts at the hospital cafeteria and cleaning offices on weekends. Gone. But I didn't hesitate. She was my daughter, my future, my everything. I remember the nights I spent nursing her through fevers and nightmares, even when I was so exhausted my hands shook as I placed cool washcloths on her forehead. The times she would wake up screaming from bad dreams about her father leaving, and I would hold her until dawn, whispering that everything would be okay, that I would never leave her. "Mommy, promise you'll stay," she would whisper into my shoulder. "Always, baby girl. Always." The silent forgiveness when she became a teenager and turned into someone I barely recognized. When she would scream at me for no reason, her face twisted with anger that seemed to come from nowhere. "You don't understand me," she would shout, slamming her bedroom door so hard the walls shook. "You don't understand anything." But I did understand. I understood that she was hurting, that losing her father had left a wound that hadn't healed properly. So I absorbed her anger, let it wash over me like acid rain, because I thought that's what mothers were supposed to do. When she left for college, I thought things would get better. I thought distance would give her perspective, help her see that I had always been on her side. Instead, the calls became shorter, less frequent. "I'm working 2 jobs, Mom. Don't expect more." The words came through the phone like ice picks, sharp and cold. I just wanted to see how you're doing, sweetheart. I miss you. I know. But I'm busy. I have to go. Click. The cold silences that followed stretched for days, sometimes weeks. Our small apartment, which had once felt cozy when it was just the two of us, became a mausoleum of memories. The couch where we used to watch movies together collected dust. The kitchen table where she did her homework while I made dinner became a place where I ate alone, surrounded by the ghosts of conversations that would never happen again. I remember once telling her during one of our rare phone calls, "I just want you to be safe, honey. I worry about you in that city." "Safe," she snapped, and I could hear the eye roll in her voice. "Safe is boring, Mom. You don't get it. You never got it." Maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't get it. Her father had left when things got too hard, when the responsibility of being a parent became more burden than joy. Had I failed her somehow? Made her hard like him? I began to question everything. Was I just a wallet to her? A burden she felt obligated to tolerate? Was I becoming a ghost in the life she was building in Manhattan's fast lanes, surrounded by people who mattered more than the woman who had given up her dreams to make sure she could chase hers? The doubts crept in slowly, like water through a crack in the foundation. When she would call, which wasn't often, our conversations felt transactional. She needed money for a security deposit. She needed me to co-sign a loan. She needed this, she needed that. But she never needed me. When she manipulated conversations to blame me for her unhappiness, I felt the sting most of all. Somehow, it was my fault that her father left. My fault that we didn't have more money. My fault that she had to work so hard. The line between love and obligation blurred in my tired eyes until I couldn't tell which was which anymore. But the worst part? The absolute worst part was how she treated the stories that had once bound us together. The treasure stories that had filled her childhood with wonder became something shameful in her adult life. "Mom, you need to stop telling people about that ridiculous treasure chest," she would say whenever I mentioned it to her friends or coworkers. "It's embarrassing. It makes you sound senile." Senile. As if believing in something magical, something hopeful, was a sign of mental decline rather than the fierce optimism that had carried me through decades of hardship. The stories weren't just stories to me. They were the last connection I had to her father, who had left us but not before filling my head with tales of adventure and hidden fortunes in the mountains where he'd grown up. They were the dreams that had sustained me through the darkest days after he left, the belief that somewhere out there was something better, something that could change our lives. But to Rebecca, they were just the ramblings of an old woman who couldn't accept reality. Have you ever felt like that? Like the things that matter most to you are treated as jokes by the people who are supposed to love you? It's a special kind of loneliness, one that eats away at you from the inside. The microaggressions started small, so small I almost didn't notice them at first. Like water wearing away stone, they were gentle but persistent. Birthdays became afterthoughts. My 70th birthday passed with a text message sent 3 days late. "Sorry, crazy week. Happy birthday." 3 words and 2 emojis. That was it. No call, no visit, no acknowledgement of the 7 decades I had lived, most of them dedicated to keeping our little family together. My 71st birthday was forgotten entirely until I mentioned it to her a week later. "Oh God, Mom, I'm so sorry. Work has been insane. We'll do something next week, I promise." Next week never came. Later, when I would try to bring it up gently, she would respond with irritation rather than apology. "Mom, you know I love you. Do I really need to make a big deal out of every birthday? We're adults now." Adults. As if loving your mother and wanting to celebrate her life was something you outgrew, like belief in Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy. The holidays became exercises in disappointment. Thanksgiving dinner became, "We might stop by if we can, but Marcus has family obligations too." Christmas morning became, "We'll come over later, after we open gifts at Marcus's parents' house." I would spend these days alone in the apartment, looking out the window at families hurrying down the street with armloads of presents and food, wondering what I had done wrong. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional siren or the upstairs neighbor's television playing too loud. When I got sick last winter, a persistent cough that wouldn't go away, chest pain that kept me awake at night, I called Rebecca because I was scared. I was scared and alone and thinking about how my own mother had died of pneumonia, how quickly things could go from bad to worse at my age. "Rebecca, honey, I think I might need to see a doctor. This cough has been going on for weeks." "Mom, you're fine. You always think every little thing is the end of the world. Take some cough drops and get some rest." "But the pain in my chest, you're being dramatic." "It's probably just anxiety. You watch too much news." "Dramatic. Anxious. Hypochondriac." The words stacked up like bricks in a wall between us. The ache in my chest was less from sickness than from the realization that my own daughter didn't care enough to take my concerns seriously. If something happened to me, if I collapsed in this apartment, how long would it be before anyone noticed? The cough turned into bronchitis. The bronchitis could have become pneumonia if Mrs. Chen from next door hadn't insisted on taking me to the emergency room when she heard me wheezing through the thin walls. Rebecca found out I'd been hospitalized 3 days after the fact, when I was already home recovering. "Why didn't you call me?" she demanded, but there was guilt in her voice rather than genuine concern. "I tried, sweetheart. I left messages. I was busy, Mom. You know how it is." I did know how it was. I knew that her job at the marketing firm in Midtown was more important than her mother's health. I knew that her social life with Marcus and their friends took precedence over checking in on the woman who had sacrificed everything to raise her. I knew that I had become an afterthought in the life I had created for her. But the final blow, the one that nearly broke me completely, came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Chen, my sweet 80-year-old neighbor, was the one who told me what I should have discovered myself. "Eleanor, dear," she said one afternoon as we shared tea in her kitchen, "I hope you don't mind me asking, but are you planning to move soon?" "Move? Why would you ask that?" Her weathered face creased with concern. "Well, that nice young man who comes to see you sometimes, your daughter's husband, he was here last week with some people who looked like real estate agents. I saw them taking pictures of your apartment building, measuring things. They seemed very interested in your unit specifically." The teacup felt suddenly heavy in my hands. Real estate agents? I could be wrong, dear. But they had clipboards and measuring tapes, and one of them pointed up at your windows and made notes. I just thought maybe you knew about it. The world tilted sideways. I felt like I was falling, even though I was sitting perfectly still in Mrs. Chen's familiar kitchen with its smell of jasmine tea and old wood. That evening, I couldn't stop myself. I did something I had never done before. I went through Rebecca's purse when she came to visit. She had excused herself to use the bathroom, leaving her bag on my kitchen table, and I found myself moving toward it like a sleepwalker. Inside, pressed between her wallet and her phone, was a sheaf of papers. Real estate listings. Market analyses. And there, paper-clipped to the top, was a note in handwriting I didn't recognize. "Ease building, rent-stabilized unit could be worth $3,200 per month if we can get her to move. Building going co-op next year. Perfect timing. Ease building. E for Eleanor." They were talking about my home, my refuge, the place where I had raised her and planned to live out my days. And they were planning to force me out of it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fold the papers back the way I had found them. When Rebecca returned from the bathroom, I was sitting in my chair by the window, staring out at the street, trying to process what I had just learned. "You okay, Mom? You look pale." "I'm fine," I lied, because that's what I always did. I was always fine, always okay, always ready to absorb whatever pain life decided to hand me. But I wasn't fine. I was discovering that my own daughter and her husband were actively working to displace me, to turn my home into profit. The apartment where I had bandaged her scraped knees and helped her with algebra homework and held her when she cried about boys, they wanted to take it away from me. That night, after she left with promises to call soon that we both knew she wouldn't keep, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee that grew cold as I struggled to understand what was happening to my life. The refrigerator hummed. The upstairs neighbor's television droned. The city never slept outside my windows, but inside my apartment, everything felt dead. I thought about the treasure stories then, the ones Rebecca ridiculed. The ones about the chest hidden somewhere in the Adirondacks, worth millions of dollars according to the old-timers who had filled my late husband's head with dreams of adventure. Harry had believed those stories until the day he walked out. He had believed in magic, in possibility, in the idea that life could be more than just surviving from paycheck to paycheck. Maybe that's why he left. Maybe he went looking for that treasure and found something else instead. Maybe he found freedom from responsibility, from the weight of caring for other people, from the slow suffocation of ordinary life. I envied him in that moment. I envied his ability to just walk away when things got too hard. But then I thought about the dusty trunk in my bedroom closet, the one I hadn't opened since Harry left 15 years ago. The one that held his clothes and papers and all the remnants of the life we had planned together. Maybe it was time to look inside, to see if he had left behind anything besides heartbreak and unpaid bills. That's when I found it, the thing that changed everything. Hidden under a pile of Harry's old flannel shirts, wrapped in a plastic bag yellow with age, was a leather ledger I had never seen before. The pages were filled with Harry's handwriting, notes and sketches and what looked like measurements. Maps drawn in fading ink, marked with X's and arrows and notations I didn't understand. But what made my heart stop was the photograph tucked into the back cover. A Polaroid, creased and faded, showing Harry standing next to what looked like an old wooden chest. He was grinning, his arm stretched out to show the size of the thing, and someone had drawn a smiley face on the chest in blue pen. On the back of the photograph, in Harry's familiar scrawl, "Found it. Eleanor's going to flip. 20 miles northeast of Lake George, Old Campbell property. GPS coordinates 43.4624 degrees north, 73.6037 degrees west. This is it, baby. This is our ticket out. Our ticket out." He had found it. The treasure from the stories, the chest worth millions, the answer to all our prayers. And he had left anyway. He had walked away from me, from Rebecca, from the life we could have had together. I sat on my bedroom floor, surrounded by his old things, holding proof that the stories I had been ridiculed for believing were real. The treasure existed. Harry had found it. And instead of coming home to share the good news, he had abandoned his family. The betrayal was like a physical blow. Not just that he had left, but that he had left knowing he was taking away our one chance at a different kind of life. He had chosen to keep the treasure for himself rather than use it to give his daughter the opportunities she deserved. But there was something else in that photograph, something that made me look closer. The chest was partially opened in the picture, and I could see what looked like gold coins gleaming inside. Harry's expression wasn't just excited, it was guilty. Like he knew he was doing something wrong. Had he taken the treasure with him when he left? Was that how he had been able to disappear so completely, without a trace? Or was it still there, waiting in the mountains for someone brave enough to claim it? I stayed up all night reading through the ledger, trying to decipher Harry's notes. The coordinates led to a plot of land in the Adirondacks that had once belonged to the Campbell family, wealthy industrialists who had fled New York during the Great Depression. According to Harry's research, they had buried their fortune before leaving the country, planning to return when things settled down. They never did. The chest contained not just gold coins but stock certificates, jewelry, and cash that would be worth millions in today's money. Harry had spent years researching the story, following leads, talking to local historians and treasure hunters. And he had found it. The question was, what was I going to do with this information? Part of me wanted to confront Rebecca immediately, to shove the photographs and maps in her face and demand an apology for all the times she had called me delusional. But another part of me, the part that had been growing stronger through months of neglect and disappointment, wanted something more. I wanted to prove to myself that I was capable of more than just being a victim. I wanted to show my daughter that the woman she dismissed as a foolish old lady was actually someone worth respecting. I wanted to find that treasure myself. But first, I had to deal with the more immediate problem of my daughter's betrayal. The next morning, I called Rebecca and asked her to come over. I had decided to confront her about the real estate situation, to give her a chance to explain herself before I took any drastic action. She arrived with Marcus in tow, both of them wearing the patient, condescending expressions they reserved for dealing with difficult elderly relatives. They sat on my couch like they owned it, which, apparently, they were hoping to soon. "Mom, you sounded upset on the phone," Rebecca said, looking around the apartment like she was already mentally redecorating it. "What's wrong?" "I know about the real estate agents," I said simply. The color drained from her face. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, suddenly very interested in his phone. "What real estate agents?" she asked, but her voice was too high, too forced. "The ones who were here last week, measuring my apartment, taking pictures. The ones you hired to figure out how much money you could make if you forced me to move." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Outside, I could hear children playing in the courtyard, their laughter a cruel counterpoint to the tension in my living room. Finally, Marcus cleared his throat. "Mrs. Patterson, we weren't trying to hurt you. We're thinking about your future, about what's best for everyone." "What's best for everyone, or what's best for your bank account?" "Mom, you're 72 years old," Rebecca said, leaning forward with false concern. "This apartment is too much for you. You could fall down those stairs. The neighborhood isn't safe anymore. We're trying to help you find somewhere more appropriate." "More appropriate for who?" "For someone your age. There are lovely senior communities in Queens, places where you'd have people to look after you, activities, a social life." A social life. As if the problem with my life was lack of activities rather than lack of love from my own family. "And what happens to this apartment after I move to one of these lovely communities?" Another silence. This one longer, more uncomfortable. "Well," Marcus said carefully, "we would probably need to sell it. To help pay for your care, of course." "Of course. Always for my own good. Always about my care. Never about the $3,000 a month in rental income they could collect once I was safely tucked away somewhere out of sight." I looked at my daughter, this woman I had raised and sacrificed for and loved unconditionally, and saw a stranger. When had she become someone who could look me in the eye and lie so smoothly about caring for my welfare while planning to profit from my displacement? "Get out," I said quietly. "Mom, get out of my apartment. Both of you." "You're being unreasonable," Rebecca said, her voice taking on that familiar edge of irritation. "We're trying to have an adult conversation about your future." "My future? Or your future? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've got my future all planned out, and it doesn't include asking me what I want." "What you want isn't always what's best for you," Marcus said, and I could hear the real contempt in his voice now that the mask was slipping. "You're an old woman living alone in a building that's falling apart. You can't take care of yourself indefinitely. I've been taking care of myself just fine for 15 years since my husband left. I think I can manage a little longer. Can you?" Rebecca stood up, her patience finally exhausted. "Because Mrs. Chen called me last month worried about you. She said you were coughing all night, that you looked sick. What if something happens to you? What if you fall and can't get help? What if you actually called me once in a while to check on me instead of relying on my neighbors for updates on my health?" The words came out sharper than I intended, but I wasn't sorry. I was done being sorry, done making excuses, done pretending that their neglect was acceptable as long as it was wrapped in concern for my well-being. "That's not fair," Rebecca said. "Isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you visited without needing something? When was the last time you treated me like a person instead of a problem to be solved?" She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. "Good. Let her think about that. We're trying to help you, Mom. But you have to let us. Help me by lying to me? Help me by going behind my back? Help me by planning to sell my home without bothering to discuss it with me first?" "It's not your home," Marcus said, and there it was, the truth finally out in the open. "It's a rent-stabilized apartment that's costing the building owners money every month. The building is going co-op. If you don't buy your unit, you'll be evicted anyway. We're trying to help you get ahead of that. By making sure you get a piece of the profits. By making sure we can afford to take care of you when you can't take care of yourself anymore," Rebecca shot back. "Do you have any idea how much senior care costs these days? If we can't afford to help you, who will?" And there it was, the final insult. They were planning to steal my home and sell it, then use the money they made from my displacement to pay for warehousing me somewhere I didn't want to be. They were going to profit from my misery and call it love. I stood up slowly, my joints protesting after sitting tense for so long. "I want you both to leave now. And don't come back unless you're invited." "Mom, you're upset. Let's talk about this rationally." "I am being rational. I'm rationally deciding that I don't want people in my life who lie to me and manipulate me and plan to steal from me while pretending it's for my own good. So leave." They exchanged glances, the look of people who had clearly discussed how to handle my unreasonable behavior. "Fine," Rebecca said, grabbing her purse. "But when you realize you need help, don't expect us to drop everything to come running." The threat was clear. Behave or be abandoned. Submit or be alone. "I wouldn't dream of it," I said, and meant it. After they left, I sat in the sudden quiet of my apartment and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: relief. Pure, clean relief, like setting down a weight I hadn't realized was crushing me. For the first time in months, maybe years, I had stood up for myself. I had refused to be manipulated. I had said no. It felt terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from anxiety or sadness, but from a strange kind of energy I hadn't felt since I was young. I kept thinking about Harry's ledger, about the coordinates, about the treasure chest waiting in the mountains. What if I went looking for it? What if, instead of sitting around waiting for my daughter to decide my fate, I took control of my own life for once? The idea seemed crazy, even to me. A 72-year-old woman, hiking alone in the Adirondacks, searching for a treasure that might not even still be there. Rebecca would say I was having a mental breakdown. She would use it as evidence that I couldn't take care of myself. But maybe that didn't matter anymore. Maybe what mattered was doing something for myself, something that had nothing to do with anyone else's approval or disapproval. I got up and made a cup of tea, then spread Harry's maps out on my kitchen table. The coordinates led to an area about 20 miles from Lake George, in what looked like deep forest. According to his notes, the chest was buried near a distinctive rock formation, under what he described as the Twin Pines. It would be a difficult hike for someone my age. Dangerous, even. But Harry's notes suggested there was an old logging road that got pretty close to the site. If I could drive most of the way, the actual walking wouldn't be too strenuous. The more I thought about it, the more possible it seemed. I had been hiking in those mountains before, back when Harry and I were younger and still believed in adventure. I knew the area, knew the roads. And I had something now that I hadn't had then, nothing left to lose. The next morning, I called in sick to the part-time cleaning job I had been working to supplement my social security. For the first time in years, I was going to do something impulsive, something just for me. I drove to the sporting goods store in Prospect Heights and bought a backpack, a good pair of hiking boots, a small camping shovel, and a GPS device. The young clerk looked at me strangely, probably wondering why a woman my age needed hiking equipment, but I didn't care. "Going on an adventure?" he asked as he rang up my purchases. "Something like that," I said, and surprised myself by smiling. The drive to the Adirondacks took about 4 hours from Brooklyn. 4 hours of highway and smaller roads, of cities giving way to suburbs giving way to forest. 4 hours to think about what I was doing, to second-guess myself, to turn around and go home. But I didn't turn around. With every mile, I felt more certain that this was something I needed to do, not just for the treasure but for myself. I needed to prove that I was still capable of taking risks, still capable of hope. The logging road Harry had marked on his map was overgrown but still passable. I drove as far as I dared, until the ruts became too deep for my old Honda, then parked and shouldered my backpack. The forest was beautiful, all golden autumn light filtering through leaves that were just beginning to turn. The air smelled like pine needles and earth and possibility. For the first time in months, I felt truly alive. The hike to the coordinates took longer than I expected. I had to stop frequently to rest, to check the GPS, to make sure I was going in the right direction. But eventually, I found the rock formation Harry had described, 2 massive boulders leaning against each other like old friends. And there, about 50 feet away, were the twin pines. 2 enormous trees growing so close together their roots were intertwined, just as Harry had sketched them in his ledger. My heart was pounding, from exertion and excitement and the sheer impossibility of what I was doing. I was actually here, actually looking for buried treasure like some kind of elderly pirate. Harry's notes indicated the chest was buried about 10 feet north of the twin pines, near a smaller boulder marked with an X that he had chiseled himself. It took me 20 minutes to find the boulder, hidden under years of fallen leaves and moss. And there was the X, still visible despite years of weather. I started digging. The ground was hard, packed with roots and stones, and after 15 minutes I was exhausted. My back ached, my hands were blistered despite the gloves I wore, and I was beginning to wonder if I had made a terrible mistake. But then the shovel hit something solid. Something that wasn't a rock. With shaking hands, I cleared away the dirt and exposed the corner of what looked like an old wooden chest, just like the one in Harry's photograph. It was smaller than I had expected, maybe 2 feet square, but it was definitely man-made. It took another hour to dig it out completely. By the time I had it free from the earth, I was covered in dirt and sweat and completely exhausted. But I had done it. I had actually found Harry's treasure. The chest was locked, but the wood was old and weathered, and the latch gave way after a few tries with my multi-tool. The lid creaked open like something from a movie. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth that had protected them for decades, were stacks of gold coins. Jewelry that caught the afternoon light and threw it back in brilliant flashes. Stock certificates in companies I recognized, some of which were now worth fortunes. And bundles of cash in denominations I had never seen before. I sat back on my heels, staring at more money than I had ever imagined seeing in one place. Harry hadn't lied. The treasure was real, and it was worth millions. But more than the money, more than the gold and jewels, was what this moment represented. I had done something everyone said was impossible. I had proved that the crazy old lady with her ridiculous treasure stories knew what she was talking about. I had proved it to myself, and that was enough. Getting the chest back to my car was another challenge entirely. It was heavier than I expected, gold is denser than most people realize, and I had to make several trips, carrying handfuls of coins and jewelry in my backpack and dragging the empty chest behind me. By the time I reached my car, the sun was setting and I was more tired than I had ever been in my life. But I was also more exhilarated, more proud of myself, more certain of my own capabilities than I had felt in years. The drive home was surreal. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror at the chest secured in my back seat, wondering if I was dreaming. But the ache in my muscles was real, the dirt under my fingernails was real, and the small fortune sitting behind me was definitely real. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove to a storage facility in Queens and rented a unit, paying for a year in advance with cash from my savings. I moved the chest and its contents into the unit, keeping only a few gold coins as proof of what I had accomplished. Then I drove home to Brooklyn, took the longest shower of my life, and sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea, trying to process what had just happened. I had found a treasure. An actual treasure. I was potentially a millionaire several times over. But more importantly, I had found something else, the knowledge that I was still capable of more than anyone gave me credit for. Including myself. I didn't tell anyone what I had found. Not yet. There would be time for that later, time to figure out what to do with the money, how to handle the legal and tax implications, how to turn gold coins and old stock certificates into a secure future. For now, it was enough to know that I had done something extraordinary. Something that proved I was more than just a burden, more than just a problem to be solved. I was a woman who had found $1 million treasure. And tomorrow, I was going to start figuring out what to do with that information. But first, I had some phone calls to make. I didn't call Rebecca right away. I needed time to think, to plan, to decide how I wanted to handle the situation. The knowledge of what I had found felt like power, and I wasn't ready to give that up yet. Instead, I spent the next few days doing research. I found a lawyer who specialized in found property and treasure hunting, a financial advisor who understood how to handle windfalls, and an appraiser who could help me determine the exact value of what I had discovered. The news was better than I had dared hope. The gold coins alone were worth over $2 million. The jewelry, much of it from the 1920s and 1930s, was worth another $1 million to collectors. And the stock certificates, if they could be authenticated and transferred, represented shares in companies that were now worth tens of millions. Conservative estimates put the total value at around $6 million. $6 million. Enough to buy my own apartment building instead of worrying about being evicted from a rent-stabilized unit. Enough to travel, to live comfortably, to help my granddaughter Sarah go to college without worrying about student loans. Enough to never have to depend on Rebecca and Marcus for anything ever again. The lawyer explained that since I had found the treasure on abandoned property, and since I could prove through Harry's research that it had been lost rather than stolen, I had a legitimate claim to ownership. There would be paperwork, taxes, legal procedures, but the treasure was mine. I was rich. At 72 years old, after a lifetime of struggle and sacrifice, I was finally, genuinely, independently wealthy. And the first thing I wanted to do was share the news with my daughter. Not because I needed her approval, but because I wanted to see her face when she realized that the mother she had dismissed as delusional had just accomplished something extraordinary. I called her on a Thursday evening, when I knew she would be home from work but not yet distracted by dinner preparations. "Mom? Is everything okay? You sound different." I did sound different. I felt different. For the first time in years, I was calling my daughter from a position of strength rather than need. "I'm fine, honey. Better than fine, actually. I wanted to tell you something." "What is it?" "Remember those treasure stories you always said were ridiculous? The ones about the chest in the Adirondacks?" I could practically hear her rolling her eyes. "Mom, please don't start with that again. We've talked about this." "You're right, we have talked about it. And you've made it very clear that you think I'm a foolish old woman living in Fantasyland." "I never said that." "Didn't you?" "Because I distinctly remember you calling my stories pathetic. I remember you being embarrassed by them, telling me to stop sharing them with people because they made me sound senile." "Mom, where is this going?" "It's going here, Rebecca. I found it. I found the treasure. All of it. And it's worth approximately $6 million. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I wondered if she had hung up. "What did you just say?" "I said I found the treasure. The one from the stories. The one you've been ridiculing for years. I found it, I dug it up myself, and I now own approximately $6 million worth of gold, jewelry, and historical artifacts." "That's not possible." "Isn't it? Because I'm looking at the appraisal documents right now. And tomorrow, I'm meeting with my financial advisor to discuss investment strategies." "Your financial advisor?" I could hear the confusion in her voice, the struggle to process this information. "Yes, my financial advisor. Because when you suddenly acquire several $1 million, you need professional help managing it." "Mom, if this is some kind of joke, it's not a joke, Rebecca. It's real. The stories were real, the treasure was real, and your supposedly senile old mother just proved that she knows a lot more about the world than you gave her credit for." Another long silence. "How?" she finally asked, and I could hear the beginning of belief in her voice. "Your father's research. He found it years before he left us, but he kept it a secret. I found his notes and maps after our conversation last week, and I decided to see for myself whether the crazy old lady's stories were true." "You went treasure hunting? By yourself?" "Mom, that's incredibly dangerous. What if something had happened to you?" "Something did happen to me. I got rich." I heard Marcus's voice in the background, asking what was wrong. Rebecca must have covered the phone, because their conversation was muffled, but I could make out enough to know she was telling him about the treasure. When she came back on the line, her voice had changed. Less dismissive, more careful. Mom, if this is really true, we need to talk. There are legal issues, tax implications. You can't just find buried treasure and keep it without proper documentation. You're absolutely right. Which is why I've already consulted with lawyers and financial advisors. Everything is being handled properly. You've already talked to lawyers? Without consulting us? Why would I consult you? You've made it very clear that my judgment isn't to be trusted. You think I'm too old and incompetent to manage my own life, remember? Too senile to live in my own apartment? That's different. That's about your safety and well-being. No, Rebecca. That's about your convenience and profit. But we don't need to argue about that anymore, because the problem has been solved. I won't be needing your help with housing, or healthcare, or anything else. I can afford to take care of myself now. Mom, you're angry. I understand that. But money doesn't solve everything. You still need family, you still need people who care about you. Do I? Because the people who are supposed to care about me have spent the past few years treating me like a burden they can't wait to get rid of. The people who are supposed to care about me were planning to force me out of my home so they could profit from my displacement. We were trying to help you. Were you? Or were you trying to help yourselves to a $3,000 monthly rental income? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Look, Rebecca, I'm not calling to punish you or make you feel guilty. I'm calling because, despite everything, I love you and I wanted to share this news with you. But I'm not the same woman I was last week. I'm not the same woman you can dismiss and manipulate and plan around without bothering to include me in the conversation. What does that mean? It means that the next time you see me, you'll be seeing someone who has options. Someone who has proven she's still capable of taking care of herself, of making her own decisions, of accomplishing extraordinary things. Someone who deserves respect, not pity. Mom, of course we respect you. Do you? Because respect isn't something you say, Rebecca. It's something you show. And what you've shown me is that you see me as an inconvenience to be managed rather than a person to be valued. I could hear her crying now, soft sniffles that she was trying to hide. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry if we made you feel that way. If you made me feel that way? Rebecca, you did make me feel that way. You and Marcus conspired behind my back to displace me from my home. You dismissed my stories and my dreams as the ramblings of a senile old woman. You treated me like a burden instead of your mother. We were worried about you. You're getting older, and you thought I was becoming incompetent. Well, does finding a $6 million treasure sound like something an incompetent person could do? No, she admitted. Good. Because I'm not incompetent, and I'm not helpless, and I'm certainly not someone who can be lied to and manipulated without consequences. What kind of consequences? It was a fair question, and one I had been thinking about for days. I don't know yet, I said honestly. But I know that things are going to be different between us. They have to be different, because I'm different now. Different how? I'm someone who has choices now, Rebecca. I don't have to accept disrespect because I need your help with my rent or my medical bills. I don't have to pretend that neglect is acceptable because I'm afraid of being completely alone. I can demand better treatment because I have the resources to enforce those demands. Are you saying you don't want us in your life anymore? The question hung in the air like smoke. It was the question I had been avoiding, even in my own thoughts. I'm saying I don't want the version of you that's been in my life for the past few years. The version that lies to me and dismisses me and plans my future without consulting me. But if there's a different version, one that treats me like a person worthy of respect and honesty, then I'm interested in meeting her. Mom, we love you. I know you do. But love without respect isn't enough anymore. I've spent too many years accepting crumbs of affection mixed with large portions of condescension. I deserve better than that. What do you want from us? I want you to see me, not as a problem to be solved or a burden to be managed, but as a person with her own thoughts and feelings and capabilities. I want you to include me in decisions that affect my life rather than making those decisions for me. And I want you to stop treating my dreams and stories as evidence of mental decline instead of signs of an active imagination and optimistic spirit. Okay, she said, so quietly I almost didn't hear her. Okay, you're right. About all of it. We haven't been treating you with the respect you deserve, and I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry. It was a start. Maybe not enough, but a start. I'm not ready to forgive you yet, I told her. But I'm willing to see if we can build something better than what we had. What does that look like? I don't know. We'll have to figure it out as we go. But it starts with honesty, and it starts with you accepting that I'm capable of making my own decisions about my own life. Even if we think those decisions are dangerous or unwise? Even then. Because they're my decisions to make, not yours. We talked for another hour, tentatively beginning the process of rebuilding a relationship that had been damaged by years of misunderstandings and mutual resentment. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't immediately healing, but it was honest in a way our conversations hadn't been in years. When we finally hung up, I felt drained but hopeful. Change was possible, but it would take time and effort from both of us. The next morning, Rebecca showed up at my apartment with coffee and bagels from the deli I liked. The one she usually complained was too expensive. "I wanted to see you," she said when I opened the door. "I wanted to hear about the treasure, about what you found, about what happens next." For the first time in months, maybe years, she was asking about my life because she was genuinely interested, not because she needed something from me. We spent the morning looking through printouts of the appraisal documents, photos I had taken of the treasure before placing it in storage, and Harry's original ledger with his research notes. "I can't believe Dad actually found it," Rebecca said, running her finger along one of his hand-drawn maps. "I can't believe he kept it secret. I think he was planning to tell us. But then he got scared, or guilty, or maybe just overwhelmed by what it would mean for our lives. And instead of dealing with those feelings, he ran away. Do you hate him for that?" I thought about it carefully. I used to. But now I think I understand him better. Having something this valuable, this life-changing, is terrifying. It would have changed everything about who we were, how people saw us, how we saw ourselves. Maybe he wasn't ready for that responsibility. Are you ready for it? I don't know. But I'm 72 years old, and if I'm not ready for change now, when will I be? We talked about practical things then, legal procedures, tax obligations, investment strategies. Rebecca had a background in finance, and for the first time in years, she was offering her expertise rather than her judgment. "You could buy a house," she suggested. "Somewhere with a garden, maybe near the ocean. You always said you wanted to live by the water." I could. Or I could travel. See the places your father and I always talked about visiting but never could afford. You could do both. Yes, I realized with a sense of wonder. I could do both. For the first time in decades, the world felt full of possibilities rather than limitations. But even as we planned and dreamed together, I could sense Rebecca struggling with something. Finally, as we were cleaning up our lunch dishes, she found the courage to voice it. "Mom, I need to apologize for something else. Something I haven't told you about yet." My stomach tightened. "What now? What is it?" "The trip to the Adirondacks. The one where you said I abandoned you." It wasn't supposed to happen that way. I set down the dish I was washing and turned to face her. "What do you mean?" "I mean I didn't plan to leave you there. I was angry, and hurt, and I was walking away to cool off. But then Marcus called with some work emergency, and I got distracted, and by the time I remembered where we were and came back to find you, you were gone. I was gone because I walked back to the parking area after waiting for 2 hours. I know. And I panicked. I looked for you for another hour, but your car was gone, and I didn't know if you had driven home or if something awful had happened. I called the police. I called Mrs. Chen to see if you had made it home safely. When I found out you were okay, I was so relieved and so embarrassed that I didn't know how to explain what had happened." "So you just pretended it never happened?" I was ashamed. I was ashamed that I had gotten so distracted I forgot about my own mother. I was ashamed that you had been alone and scared because of my negligence. And I was afraid that if I tried to explain, it would just make everything worse. I stared at her, trying to process this new information. She hadn't deliberately abandoned me. She had made a mistake, a thoughtless, hurtful mistake, but not a malicious one. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I can't stand the thought of you believing I would intentionally leave you alone in the woods. Because I need you to know that no matter how badly I've treated you, I would never do something that cruel on purpose." "But you did do it, Rebecca. Intentionally or not, you left me alone and afraid in a place where I could have been hurt or lost. The fact that it was negligence rather than malice doesn't make the experience any less traumatic for me." "I know. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She was crying again, the kind of tears that come from genuine remorse rather than self-pity. "I accept your apology," I said finally. "But I need you to understand that sorry isn't enough. Sorry doesn't erase the damage that was done, or the pattern of neglect that made that kind of mistake possible. What can I do to make it right?" "You can't make it right, Rebecca. You can only commit to doing better going forward." "How do I do that?" "By remembering that I'm a person, not an obligation. By including me in your life instead of managing me from the sidelines. By treating my thoughts and feelings as valid even when you don't understand them. And by believing in your treasure stories?" I smiled despite myself. "Well, that one turned out to be pretty important, didn't it?" She laughed, and for a moment, she looked like the little girl I remembered, the one who used to sit on my lap and listen wide-eyed to tales of adventure and hidden fortunes. What are you going to do with the money, Mom? Really? I don't know yet. But I know I'm going to do something meaningful with it, something that matters. Like what? Like making sure my granddaughter never has to choose between her dreams and financial reality the way you did. Like maybe setting up a foundation to help other people who feel dismissed or forgotten by their families. Like proving that 60-year-old women can still have adventures. 72-year-old women. Even better. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about possibilities, about the future, about the relationship we wanted to build together. It wasn't perfect, there was still hurt and mistrust and years of damage to work through. But it was a beginning. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt hopeful about my relationship with my daughter. But the real test was still to come. 2 weeks later, Rebecca asked if she could bring Marcus and the kids over for dinner. A family gathering, something we hadn't had in over a year. I agreed, but with conditions. No discussions about my housing situation. No suggestions about what I should or shouldn't do with my money. And absolutely no patronizing comments about my age or capabilities. They arrived at 6 o'clock sharp, Marcus carrying flowers and looking uncharacteristically humble. The kids, Sarah, now 10, and her older brother Jake, 13, were polite but cautious, the way children are when they sense adult tensions they don't understand. Dinner was awkward at first. Marcus made several attempts at small talk that fell flat. Jake was absorbed in his phone despite repeated requests to put it away. But Sarah, sweet Sarah, was genuinely interested in everything. Grandma, Mom said you found real treasure. Like pirates? Not exactly like pirates, sweetheart. But yes, I found a treasure chest that had been buried for many years. Was there gold in it? Lots of gold. And jewels, and other valuable things. Can I see it? The treasure is in a safe place now, but I have pictures. I showed her the photos I had taken, and her eyes grew wide with wonder. You're like a real treasure hunter. That's so cool. Jake looked up from his phone long enough to ask, how much is it worth? Jake, Rebecca warned, but I held up a hand. It's okay. It's worth several $1,000,000, Jake. Million? Holy, he caught himself before the curse word, glancing at his parents. That's like, more money than some people make in their whole lives. Yes, it is. Which is why I take the responsibility very seriously. What are you going to do with it all? I'm still deciding. But one thing I know for sure is that I want to help you and Sarah with college, so you don't have to worry about student loans. Both kids lit up at this news, but it was Marcus who looked the most relieved. I realized that their family's financial situation might be more precarious than I had understood. Mom, that's incredibly generous, Rebecca said. But you don't have to, I want to. Not because I feel obligated, but because I can afford to now, and because I believe education is one of the most important investments we can make in the future. After dinner, while Rebecca and Marcus cleaned up in the kitchen, Sarah curled up next to me on the couch. Grandma, were you scared when you went looking for the treasure? Very scared, sweetheart. It was a big adventure for someone my age. But you did it anyway? Sometimes the things we're most scared of are the things most worth doing. She considered this seriously. Mom and Dad were worried about you. They said you could have gotten lost or hurt. They were right to be worried. It was dangerous, and I probably shouldn't have gone alone. But if you hadn't gone, you never would have found the treasure. That's true too. Sometimes grown-ups worry too much, she said with the wisdom that only children possess. Sometimes they try to keep you safe from everything, even the good stuff. Out of the mouths of babes. Later, after the dishes were done and the kids were playing video games in the next room, Marcus asked to speak with me privately. Mrs. Patterson, Eleanor, I owe you an apology. A big one. I waited. When Rebecca told me about the real estate situation, I thought we were being practical. I thought we were planning ahead for problems that were inevitable. But I realize now that we were treating you like you didn't have a say in your own life. That's exactly how you were treating me. I know. And I'm ashamed of that. My own grandmother lived independently until she was 89, and she would have been furious if anyone had tried to make decisions for her the way we were trying to make decisions for you. What changed your mind? Honestly? The treasure. Not because of the money, but because of what it represents. You did something amazing, something that required planning and courage and intelligence. You proved that you're still capable of taking care of yourself and making your own choices. I shouldn't have had to prove that, Marcus. No, you shouldn't have. We should have trusted you from the beginning. It was a better apology than I had expected, and it felt genuine. Thank you for saying that. Is there anything we can do to make up for how we've treated you? I thought about it. Yes, actually. There is. What? Include me. In your lives, in your decisions, in your family. Not as someone who needs to be taken care of, but as someone whose opinions and feelings matter. Treat me like Sarah's grandmother, not like Sarah's burden. Sarah adores you. She always has. I know. And that relationship is precious to me. I don't want it damaged by conflicts between the adults in her life. It won't be. I promise. We rejoined the family in the living room, where Sarah was showing Jake the treasure photos on my phone. Grandma, will you take us treasure hunting sometime? Sarah asked. Oh, I don't think, Rebecca started, but I interrupted. I'd love to, sweetheart. Maybe not for buried treasure, but there are lots of interesting things to find in the woods if you know where to look. Like what? Old foundations from houses that used to be there. Arrowheads and pottery shards from Native American settlements. Fossils and interesting rocks and plants you can't find in the city. That sounds awesome. We could make it a regular thing, if your parents are okay with it. Grandmother-grandchildren adventure days. Rebecca and Marcus exchanged glances, the kind of wordless communication that married couples develop. I think that sounds wonderful, Rebecca said. As long as you promise not to dig up any more million-dollar treasure chests without telling us. I make no such promises, I said with a straight face, then grinned. But I'll consider keeping you informed of any major archaeological discoveries. The laughter that followed felt natural, unforced. Like a family again. After they left that evening, I sat in my quiet apartment with a cup of tea and reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. I had gone from feeling powerless and dismissed to feeling capable and valued. I had gone from dreading my daughter's calls to looking forward to our plans together. The money had made a difference, certainly. It had given me options and leverage and the confidence that comes from financial security. But the real change was deeper than that. I had remembered who I was underneath all the years of self-doubt and accommodation. I was a woman who had raised a daughter alone after her husband abandoned them. I was someone who had worked multiple jobs to put food on the table and keep a roof over their heads. I was a person who had survived loss and disappointment and still managed to maintain hope and humor. I was someone who could find buried treasure when everyone else said it was impossible. The knowledge of my own capabilities was worth more than all the gold coins in that chest. But even as I celebrated this realization, I knew my journey wasn't over. There were still challenges ahead, still relationships to rebuild, still decisions to make about how to use my newfound resources responsibly. And there was still the question of what to do about the secret I had been keeping. Because while I had told Rebecca and Marcus about finding the treasure, I hadn't told them about the other thing I had discovered in Harry's ledger. The thing that changed everything I thought I knew about why he had left us. Hidden in the back pages, tucked between maps and research notes, was a letter. A letter addressed to me, dated just days before Harry disappeared from our lives. My dearest Eleanor, it began, if you are reading this, then you have found what we always dreamed of finding together. I hope it brings you the security and happiness you deserve, because God knows I failed to provide either. I need you to know that leaving wasn't about you or Rebecca. It was about me, about my own cowardice and shame. When I found the treasure, I thought it would solve everything. I thought it would make me the kind of man you deserved, the kind of father Rebecca needed. Instead, it made me realize how much I had failed as both. For 15 years, I watched you work 2 jobs while I chased dreams and told stories. I watched you sacrifice your own ambitions to support mine. I watched you be stronger and braver and more capable than I could ever hope to be, and instead of feeling proud to be your husband, I felt ashamed to be such a poor partner. The treasure felt like proof of my inadequacy, not evidence of my worth. Here was this incredible discovery, this vindication of all my theories and research, and all I could think about was how you had been carrying our family while I played treasure hunter. How you had been the real treasure all along, and I had been too selfish to see it. I know you'll think I'm making excuses, and maybe I am. But I need you to understand that leaving wasn't about not loving you. It was about loving you too much to burden you with a husband who felt like a failure every time he looked at your beautiful, capable, long-suffering face. The treasure is yours, Eleanor. It was always meant for you, not for me. Use it to build the life you should have had, the one I was too weak to give you. And please, if you can find it in your heart, forgive a coward who loved you more than he loved himself, but not enough to stay and prove worthy of your love. All my devotion, Harry. P.S. Tell Rebecca her old dad thought about her every day. Tell her the treasure hunt was real, just like the stories, and that believing in impossible things isn't childish, it's the only way to find them. I had read that letter a dozen times since finding it, and each time it broke my heart in a different way. Not because Harry had left, but because he had left believing he was inadequate when he was actually the dreamer who made extraordinary things possible. He had been wrong about so many things, but right about one: the treasure was meant for me. Not because I deserved it more than he did, but because I had the strength and wisdom to use it well. Now I had to decide whether to share the letter with Rebecca, whether to give her the closure and understanding I had found in her father's words. Whether to risk reopening old wounds for the possibility of healing deeper ones. That decision could wait. For now, it was enough to know that I had survived the worst my family could do to me and emerged stronger. I had faced abandonment and neglect and manipulation, and I had not only survived but thrived. I was no longer the woman who accepted scraps of attention and called it love. I was no longer someone who would tolerate disrespect for fear of being alone. I was Eleanor Patterson, treasure hunter, millionaire, grandmother, survivor. I was someone who had discovered that the most valuable treasure isn't gold or jewels, but the knowledge of your own worth. And I was just getting started. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Sarah's voice bubbled through the speaker. "Grandma, Mom said I could call you. Can we go on our adventure this weekend? I want to look for arrowheads." "Of course we can, sweetheart. I know the perfect place. Will you bring your treasure hunter tools?" "I'll bring everything we need." This is going to be the best adventure ever. As I hung up the phone, I realized she was right. This was going to be the best adventure ever. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving my life. I was living it. Have you ever found yourself in a place where the people who should love you most made you feel invisible, unimportant, or forgotten? Have you ever discovered strength you didn't know you had when everything seemed lost? I learned that sometimes the greatest treasures aren't buried in the ground, but buried inside ourselves, waiting for the right moment to be discovered. Sometimes we have to lose everything we thought we needed to find everything we actually are. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing these pieces of my soul, one painful, beautiful truth at a time. And maybe, just maybe, it will reach someone who needs to remember that they are worth more than they've been told, capable of more than they've been allowed to believe, and deserving of the respect and love they've been giving to others. The treasure was real. But the real treasure was learning to treasure myself.